Right, I've just pressed a replacement crank pin into the flywheel of the 350 Royal Enfield Trials machine's engine. I've got the old crank pin here and I don't know whether the camera will pick that up or not, but there's actually quite a bit of wear on the crank pin. There's a ridge of unworn material left in the centre where the oil groove in the floating bush runs. There's quite a lot of material gone off that crank pin. In fact, the crank pin was the most worn component of all. The floating bush actually, although I certainly wouldn't use it again obviously, isn't that bad, and the big end of eye of the conrod is okay as well. Now what I've been doing here, that incidentally is a 3/1000th of an inch feeler gauge blade I was just able to get in there, and we'll come to that now. I've been looking at the specifications in my nice original Redditch workshop manual, and we got the numbers, and I wrote them down there because they're easier to see. But in all the specifications there, among other things, you get the dimensions for the crank pin and the floating bush and the eye of the conrod, and there's like a sort of highest figure and lowest figure. So I've got them written down here anyway, and obviously that there is them. You've got the outside diameter of the floating bush and the inside diameter of the conrod, which is obviously the bigger number of the two. And if I take the sort of highest number, the biggest value for the conrod big end eye, and the smallest number for the floating bush, that's these two here, and I subtract one from the other, and I get 3¼ thousandths of an inch. So my 3/1000ths of an inch that I've got there, and bear in mind this is dry, there's no oil there, it's just clean dry components. We are just within the maximum permissible clearance between the conrod big end and the outside of the floating bush. So we're just within, and it's quite a tight fit, and pull that out, there it is. So that's 3/1000ths of an inch, and that's 3¼ thousandths of an inch that we would have been allowed as a maximum. So based on that, I'm going to put this together. I'll get it oiled up now and get the other flywheel located on there, and then set about truing the assembly, and it can be ready to go back in the engine. So some progress is being made. The other thing I wanted to point out actually is that the crank pin that I've got here and the floating bush are both components that I removed some time ago from one of the engines that became an ASBO engine, where the owner wanted a roller big end fitted. And since I built my last few ASBO engines and a couple of other engines I've worked on with plain big ends had early failures of the big ends, it's become a little bit of a worry. So what I decided to do here was this crank pin and this floating bush obviously had some mileage under their belts already and looked to be in very good condition. There's no sort of degradation of the floating bush evident. I'm gonna sort of try and tell myself that as they've already covered a mileage of whatever it might be, that they're not going to fail within 50 miles, and therefore they're probably not among some of the faulty ones that seem to be kicking about in this day and age. So I'm happier, and if this was my own crank, I'd actually feel happier about using these than possibly some, not all, but some of the parts or components that are currently available, which clearly some of them are not very good at all. So that gives me peace of mind. Hopefully it'll give the owner peace of mind as well, and we're within clearances and tolerances and everything, so all of that is looking pretty good, and I'll just see how true I can get it when I've put it all together, and hopefully we'll have a decent bottom end for this 350 Trials engine very soon.